In this lecture, we'll implement the more general constructor that lets the consumer of the class specify how many sides the constructed die object will have. We'll add our second constructor here in our constructors region. And just like for the other constructor, we'll make this constructor public. And we'll call it die because constructors have to be the same as the class name. But unlike the previous constructor, in this one, we'll have a parameter. And we'll let the consumer of the class provide the number of sides they want the new die object to have. I'll add a documentation comment. Constructor for die with num sides. And for the parameter, we'll say it's the number of sides. Now you might have noticed that IntelliSense provided us a suggestion here, and I would have taken that suggestion, but I wanted to talk about why we need to take the suggestion that IntelliSense provided. Let's start by doing what feels intuitive. What feels intuitive is we want to set the field numSides equal to the parameter numSides that was just passed in. And as you can see, these green squigglies are actually telling us that we have a warning. And the warning says, assignment made to same variable. Did you mean to assign something else? And the answer to that question is yes, we meant to assign something else. This problem is caused by something called scope. So let's talk about scope. Scope tells us the visibility of a particular variable or parameter or field. So the scope of this field goes from the point at which this variable was declared to the end of the block in which this variable was declared. So this numSides variable is visible from here all the way to the closing curly brace for this open curly brace. So this variable is visible from here all the way down to here at the end of the class. And that's actually why we can do this in our numSides property, because our numSides field is visible here. In the constructor we're writing, we have a numSides parameter, which is visible between these curly braces, and this numSides parameter hides the numSides field because they have the same name. So what we need to do is we need to say we mean the left-hand side of this assignment to be the field and the right-hand side of the assignment to be the parameter. We don't actually have to do anything about the right-hand side because it's automatically the parameter, but on the left-hand side of the assignment we need to say this numSides needs to be the field, not the parameter. The way we do this is with the this keyword followed by a dot. The this keyword is a self-reference. It refers to the object that I'm currently inside. And I know that's a counterintuitive idea for lots of beginning programmers. It's hard to wrap your head around that idea, but we've seen object references before. Anytime we call a method or access a property on an object, we put the name of the variable for the object, and then we put a dot, and then we put the property name or the method name or whatever. The same idea applies here. This is still a reference to an object. It's just a reference to the current object I'm inside. And when we use this syntax on the left-hand side of the assignment statement, it makes this be a reference to the numSides field, not the parameter. We'll go ahead and build. Over in my testing code, I've already added code for testing the D20 die, but I haven't commented out because it wouldn't compile until I wrote that constructor. Now it will, so I'll uncomment this code. And when I run, we get exactly the results we thought we should get, except I made a mistake because in my constructor, I also need to set topside. Let's try that again. And now we actually get the results we expect, where the D20 has 20 sides and the top side is set to 1. It's great news that this code works the way it should, but I find this structure unsatisfying because we have duplicated code. We have code here that sets num sides and top side, and we have code here that sets num sides and top side. And duplicated code in general is a really bad idea. We should be able to write our code in one place and use it in multiple places if we need to. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're actually going to reuse this constructor from this constructor. So I'm going to get rid of this code, and instead of including that code in the body of this constructor, I'm going to call the other constructor. The way I do that is I put a colon, and then I put, wait for it, the this keyword, and then I'm trying to call a constructor with one integer parameter. So I'll call a constructor with 6 because I want a 6-sided die. So the way the compiler works when it's checking my syntax is it says, is there a constructor that has one integer parameter? And the answer is yes, this one. So the code compiles fine. And when the code runs, if I call this constructor, what happens is it then calls this constructor. So it sets num sides to 6 and top side to 1. And we should test this code to make sure it still works fine. And it does. So the code behaves the way it did before I made this change, but I've refactored this code to be a much better structure because we don't have duplicated code. We just have the code that sets num sides and top side in one place, and we use this constructor both from the testing code directly for our second test case and indirectly from this constructor for our first test case when we were testing a standard 6-sided die. And that's all we need to do to add our second constructor to our die class. To recap, in this lecture you learned how to write a constructor with a parameter. You learned what the this keyword means and how to use it. And you learned how to avoid duplicate code by calling one constructor from another one.